Good evening. The Design Review Board public meeting of January 28, 2016 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones, pagers, etc. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker's cards provided at the table by the front door. That's one of these. And submit it to staff. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the postcards, which are brown, provided at the table by the front door, and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current DRB agendas are available by by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note, appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the DRB decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at their discretion. Roll call. Mr. Benlian.
Here.
Mr. Charchian.
Here.
Mr. Malikian.
Here.
Mr. Mardian.
Here.
And Mr. Simonian.
Present.
Thank you. Report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on January 21st, 2016. Oral communications. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on an item not a part of this agenda? Any cards by any chance?
None.
No. Okay. Then we will go on to the regular calendar. We do, under staff announcements, have the election of a new chairperson.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain someone to make a motion on who the chair should be.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Simonian.
I'll second.
All right. Roll call, please.
Okay. A motion is made to appoint Mr. Simonian the chair for the year. This will be a roll call. Mr. Benlian?
Yes.
Mr. Malikian?
Yes.
Mr. Charchian?
Yes.
Mr. Mardian?
Yes.
And Mr. Simonian.
Thrilled.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the support, gentlemen. Could we do it after the hearing? So you
No.
Too late.
No, we did that last week. No, not. I want to
put all these people in the audience.
No.
All right.
Change.
I would like to announce the first item on the agenda, PDR 1406593. The residents, new residents at 2331 Ramsey Drive is being pulled from the calendar. The project will be re-noticed. So we don't have a date. We're not continuing it. We're just pulling it from the calendar and will be re-noticed when the project is ready. All right. So now we're down to, we have 3 additional items on the agenda this evening. And I can start when you're ready.
Very good. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out this evening. We have 3 cases, but they're all adjacent to one another, and as such, I see a lot of people in the audience, so I'd like to limit all conversations to 3 minutes, so please be mindful of that. And if you have already heard someone reiterate what you're about to say, you could just say you support the project or don't support the project and just add new comments. But it'd be kind of nice for us to limit the amount of presentation by not repeating things that have been already said. I believe we have 2 speaker cards here, both of which say consultant for the projects, and they're all list the 3 addresses. So with that, I have an Artine and a Ron. And who would like to start from the consultants? Ron or Artine?
Well, I think staff.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
I can skip it. I can skip
Rusty,
it.
yeah.
I stand corrected. By all means, staff, go ahead.
All right.
Chair, the question is, should we do all 3 of them at the same time, discuss, or should we go one at a time?
Well,
or
what I'm going to do is just briefly summarize the projects and the recommendations together, but separately. I'll do the most northern one first at 1800 Marion, and then move to 1820, then 1830.
Okay.
You can discuss them all at the same time if you'd like. The motions do need to be made separately. Whatever decision you make, you need to make 3 separate decisions.
Yeah.
And if I could recommend that certainly public testimony could be taken together since these are grouped properties, but you could also take that separately. But I assume most people are probably here to discuss the group of buildings. For staff reporting purposes, when we're writing conditions, if we could focus on the individual properties, because each one may have different discussion items, and that would really help us.
So perhaps we just let staff begin, and then we could have a quick discussion whether we want to holistically discuss all 3 or break them up or have, whatever
That's fair.
alterations we'd like to do. Very good. Mr. Kiesel.
Great. Good evening, members of the Design Review Board. There are 3 new single-family residences proposed on vacant lots on Marion Drive in the Adams Hill area of the city. The lots are all zoned R1R with a floor area ratio District 3. All lots are owned by the same entity, and the homes are designed by the same architect. And as I just mentioned, I thought I'd just summarize and review the conditions of each of the 3 houses together. So I'll start with the northernmost lot at 1800 Marion Drive, and that, as you're looking at the board, it's the most left. There's 6 columns up there. The first 2 columns from the left are 1800. The middle 2 columns are 1820, and then the rightmost columns are 1830 Marion. So the most northern lot is 1800 Marion Drive. It is approximately 52,000 square foot lot and is proposed to have an approximately 4,300 square foot house with a 3-car garage. The 3-story residence is set back approximately 25 feet from the street in the southern portion of the lot. While the street front setback of the proposed residence is deeper than the majority of the homes in the neighborhood, staff believes it's appropriate given the size of the lot and the house. The proposed project includes installation of a pool adjacent to the residence. This amenity increases the amount of retaining walls needed for the site, and as a condition of approval, the board should eliminate this feature to better comply with the hillside design guidelines, which really encourages minimizing the use of retaining walls. Additionally, sort of unique to this house, the board should consider a condition eliminating the water feature, which is right near the front entry to the house, particularly given the current drought condition. As a clarification on each of the 3 projects, the staff report cites that there's a mailbox wall to be located adjacent to the street. This feature has already been eliminated in the project, and I think the drawings reflect that. So there's no need to really discuss that. The proposed site plan for the project is appropriate to the site as the placement of the house really conforms to the underlying topography of the site. The orientation of the residence minimizes the appearance of the garage, and as conditioned, retaining walls are reduced due to the location, or the elimination of the pool. The proposed residence, as I mentioned, will be approximately 4,400 square feet and is the largest, or will be the largest house in the neighborhood. Given the large lot size and the house's generous setback and stepped back design, which mimics the site topography, staff believes it relates appropriately to the surrounding context.
I'm looking at 3 different numbers on the square footage. Which one is it? 43,340?
It is
45,40?
It's the bottom one, correct? It's the bottom.
Okay. So it's 4540. That got it.
Yes.
Thanks.
Plans for the project include a generous rear yard, and this is sort of related to the pool concern as well. The board should include a condition of approval that the design of the project be amended to reduce the size of the yard by reducing the height of the retaining wall to better conform with the hillside design guidelines. With regard to massing, the broad expanses of unbroken stucco and on the western front facade really create a massiveness that's kind of at odds with the glazed eastern part of the facade. And if you look on the front elevation, you can sort of see that. Additionally, the proposed awning above the main entrance should be brought down to the first level of the residence to reduce the monumentality of the entry. The proposed mass and scale of the residence is appropriate because the residence follows the slope of the on-site topography and is conditioned. The design of the front facade will be redesigned, and also the rear retaining wall will be reduced in height. So with those conditions, staff believes that mass and scale is appropriate. With regard to the design and detailing, window information, as mentioned in the staff report, was not initially provided. The applicant has since provided this information, and I have here, I wasn't able to post it all, but I have information on the sort of the window installation here if you're interested.
Actually, I do.
Also, with the,
I'm sorry. Can
yes.
I get that?
Sure. Yeah.
And Mr. Teasel, also the neighborhood pictures, if you happen to have those.
Oh,
with the same
yeah. I
photos.
apologize for that. Let me get those.
Is it sufficient in one set? Each one has them? Just one.
There it is. Nope.
This is for the first house. They're all similar. I have them for each house.
I don't have them here.
Let me.
Hey, Roger, this is 1800. I can't
Is it
find
in
it.
here?
If you just if I could finish the report, then I'll look for it. I have one copy of it. So. Finally, with regard to design and detailing, the board should consider requiring a more natural color to the glacier white stucco that's proposed on the residence to better comply with the hillside design guidelines. And then finally, staff believes that design and detailing are appropriate for the house because the materials and the details are consistent with the contemporary design of the residence. The aluminum windows are of high quality, and the variety of materials enhances the overall design and attractiveness of the residence. And staff is recommending approval of the project with the conditions contained in the staff report. And I can go over those conditions right now if you'd like, or I can move on to the second.
No, that's fine. It's fine.
Okay. The conditions are in the staff report. I can read them if you'd like, but I can also move on. So the second house is the middle lot. It's the middle two columns. And the middle lot is 1820 Marion Drive. This is the smallest lot of the three. It is approximately 12,000 square feet in area and a proposed approximately 2,900 square foot house with a two-car garage is proposed. The three-story residence is set back approximately 30 feet from the street and is located in the central portion of the lot. Similar to the first residence, while the street front setback is deeper than the majority of the homes in the neighborhood, it is appropriate given the size of the lot, which is much larger than the typical Adams Hill lot. as well as the size of the house, which is also larger than the typical Adams Hill house. While the rear yard is split level to address the on-site topography, portions of it are deep. And if you look at the site planning, maybe I'll just point this out. Excuse me. Here's the rear yard. This is what I'm going to talk about now. The rear yard is here, but it's stepped. So this portion of the yard is at a higher level than this portion due to the topography, which is a good thing. However, staff is recommending further reductions in the retaining walls to better conform with the hillside design guidelines, because the rear yard is still pretty generous in size. Unique to this house, there is a paved area at the front of the residence, and that area it's fairly substantial and really more than necessary for ingress egress to the garage and the residence. So the board should include a condition of approval to this project to reduce the size of this driveway. Does everybody see that? Okay.
Talking about the turnaround.
I'm talking about.
This motor court.
Right.
You could actually see it better in the landscape plan.
Yeah, you can see it in the landscape plan. I thought it's not as clear here, but it's right up here, and it extends the full, sort of width of the house, and that really can be reduced. But some of it isn't necessary. The proposed site planning of the project is appropriate to the site as the placement of the house follows the slope of the site and the design of the residence pivots with the topographical lines. Also, as conditioned, the paved area in the front and the rear yard will be reduced. So with those conditions, staff believes that the site planning is appropriate. The proposed mass and scale of the residence are appropriate because the taller massing of the house is on the upslope of the property, and the building steps back with each level. So the first level is slightly in front of the second level, which is slightly in front of the third level. Additionally, as I mentioned before, the house is proposed at an angle or pivots at an angle to sort of address the topography of the site. And then also, as I mentioned, the rear yard there should be a condition to address the size of the rear yard to reduce the height of the retaining walls. I do have window information for the second house. It's similar to the first. And like the first house, glacier white stucco is proposed, and the board should consider a more natural color to substitute, just so that that color better conforms and the house better fits in with the hillside. I can go over the conditions, but staff is recommending approval of this house at 1820 Marion Drive with the conditions contained in the staff report. Do you want me to go over those conditions, or want me to proceed to 1830?
I think it's fine to proceed. We have them in the package.
Okay. All right. Finally, the southernmost lot is 1830 Marion Drive. That's the two rightmost columns. This lot is approximately 25,000 square feet in area and is proposed to have an approximately 3,300 square foot house with a 3-car garage. The residence is set back approximately 35 feet from the street. However, there's a front deck and an entry stair set back 20 feet at the closest. The setback in this area, if you recall, is 15 feet. The house is proposed in the western portion of the lot. The topography of the site breaks at an angle with the property lines and the predominant orientation of the house. The board should consider shifting the footprint of the residence to more closely follow the site topography. And that is very similar to what we're suggesting is, given the topography here, a pivot to this house, similar to what this house does. If you see it straight on here and then it pivots because of the topography, that's something that staff is suggesting the board consider here.
When you say pivot, pivot the backyard or the entire building, the structure?
Well, either something like this probably is more feasible because the house is not as long. I don't know how feasible it would be to keep this and pivot this, but it was just a thought given the topography is sort of like this and the house is straight on. So something for you all to discuss and think about.
Are the site setbacks 10 feet in this zone?
15.
They are 10 feet. Yeah.
Front.
Side.
Yeah, the side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Similar to the first two houses, the board should include a condition to reduce the size of the rear yard of this house by reducing the rear retaining walls to better conform to the hillside design guidelines. Again, this house has a pretty generous rear yard for a house on a hillside. So, the massing of the proposed house, while larger than nearby homes, is mitigated, however, by being pushed into the hill and its generous front setback. The appearance of mass, however, could be reduced further through redesigning several aspects of the house, including the wood-clad volume adjacent to the entry and the parapet and stucco volume at the left portion of the front facade. A condition should be added to the project to redesign these areas, as well as the west elevation, which provides little fenestration or articulation. And if you look, the west elevation being right here. The proposed mass and scale of the residence with the conditions is appropriate because the residence is built into the hillside and the entry is modest in scale. And with conditions, the retaining walls will be reduced in height in the rear. Finally, with regard to design and detailing, similar comments with this house similar comments to this house as the previous two houses. Window information is now provided, and staff generally believes that the design and detailing is appropriate because the materials all work together to provide a real contemporary design aesthetic. The main entrance is recessed into the house and is not overscaled. The aluminum windows are high quality and again mesh with the contemporary nature of the house. So again, this project does have conditions. I can go over them if you'd like, but staff is also recommending approval of the project with the conditions contained in the staff report.
I think similar to the last one, they're in the report, and so we don't need to reiterate them
That's
at this
fine.
point.
That's fine. So that concludes what I had to say.
If you would get us those photographs. we can
Yes,
get them on
yes,
the-
yes. And actually, I've noticed a couple people coming in while I was talking. If you'd like to speak, please fill out. Can you hold up a speaker card? Can you please fill out a speaker card? You don't have to talk, but if you want to.
They're located on the side, and then you could give it to us at any point you like. Do we have any more questions for staff before we decide to?
I think we all discussed.
Yeah, okay. Yes. Charge you.
So on the first project, the 1800 Marion Drive project, staff's recommendation is elimination of the pool. So my question is, has there been a calculation about how much cubic yards of fill, or cubic yards of removal will be saved by eliminating the pool?
No, I just have the total amount of cut and fill for the project as proposed.
Okay.
I don't know how much less would occur if that was eliminated.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, there was a statement in one of the the various comments that were sent in opposition, and I don't see any in favor yet, but in opposition that referenced this Marion Drive as an emergency road. Is this a designated emergency road by the city?
Not to my knowledge. As the applicant and neighboring property owners, interested parties speak, I can look and make sure it's a standard residential local street.
Okay.
And to
That's what I had.
follow through with Churchand's question, there's a designation of dedication shown on the site plan.
Right.
Any idea what that dedication amount is?
I think it varies.
So the width of the actual road gets widened
Correct.
along the.
Right. Right.
Marty?
Mr. Roger, is there a grading plan on this project? Some preliminary grading plan?
No. No, I don't have anything.
Because that helps me clarify a lot of things that I have. The second question I'm going to follow up with the dedication. Is this dedication going to be actually improved? The street is going to be widened?
That's my understanding. Yeah. Yeah.
So the power poles and everything else will be moving with it?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Good.
Insofar as this grading plan that Mr. Mardian was referring to, do you happen to have that color diagram, that the brown, yellow, gray diagram that depicts the areas that are left natural, etc.?
No, I don't.
Okay, since we have no more questions for staff, Mr. Malekian, you had asked the question.
Yes, I did.
What's the best way to proceed, perhaps, and how
Oh.
you would like to assess the project in their entirety or separately?
I mean, it's up to you guys. I'm okay with discussing all three projects together. I think they all relate to each other. But we can go one at a time.
I tend to lean towards discussing them all at the same time because they contextually are very much related, and we could probably have similar discussions about it. Does that work for the group? Sure. Well, with that, I guess we'll proceed in that manner. And so, as for the applicant, I have a speaker card from Mr. Marutian and also Mr. Mondalian. Who would like to start, or is there another person that would like to represent the applicant initially? Yes? Have you filled out a speaker card
Yeah,
already?
I'm Mandalian.
Wonderful.
I'm representing the designer. This is the other card.
And if you would state your full name and your address.
Ronald Mandalian,
Very good.
9554 Via Ricardo, Burbank, California, 91504.
Very good. And are you Mr. Marutian?
No, I am Mikhail Astoyan. I am designer of the project. But sorry, my English not that much. That's why the Ron have to.
So I'll help
Very
him
good.
out with the presentation if
We
you
do
have
too.
any questions. Yeah.
Very good. And you could split up your time amongst your group as well.
Okay.
You're going to have 10 minutes to present the project, and the three projects, I should say. So if you'd like, Mr. Mandalian, go ahead and start, and then as we need input from the designer. If the designer feels as though there needs to be some input, you could delegate your time accordingly.
Full 55. Big yard, I think.
Mr. Platt, have we started the time already?
It doesn't look like it.
It was at 10:41 when they started.
Okay.
Would you like to now?
Yes, can you?
Yes, we can.
You would
10
start
minutes.
the time when you get a chance to go.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just do a general statement. Designer tried to blend in all three houses into the hillside as been recommended by the staff as much as possible. We try to address every comments to follow the contours. I know there were some concerns about the yard size and amount of grading, but all three houses really have the rear yards to a minimum that can be actually usable for a single family. It's integrated into a hill as much as we could, working with the staff. Colors, same to blend in. We've been in the area. It's very, I would say, since there's not much going on past the road there, so it's as naturally sensitive as possible. That was the idea of the design. I know there were concerns about removing the water feature on one of the houses, possibly tilting the second house a little bit to follow the contours. The thing is the contours under the house actually follow the house. It's past the backyard, which kind of weird off. Overall size of the houses on FAR, it's less than what's in the neighborhood due to the lot size. I think we have 8% and like 20 when they're almost 40% in the overall neighborhood. And pretty much whatever we have speaks for itself. We're here to answer any questions and hopefully work out any conditions you may have.
Good. Mr. Mardian, yes.
Can I ask you a question, sir? Have you thought of another approach of designing these homes versus pushing it into the hill, having excessive grading, and getting it closer to the street?
Closer to the street will restrict the
versus
height.
creating all these driveways and shifting this house up on the hill?
20.
With a 29-foot height limit, that was actually the only way to fit something that will fit a
I'm
family.
talking actually getting the building closer to the street and, not so much further into the
What's
hill.
your setbacks? Aren't you very tight on the setbacks? Front
I mean, it's just a
No,
thought of mine.
Yeah. And a grading, German of something.
We actually, if we would go closer to the street, it would lower the building, which would create more grading in the back. So lifting it up by giving it a little driveway actually reduced the amount of grading. It's been, it's kind of following the slope with its contour and the position of the house. So we kind of pushed it back and up a little bit.
No,
That created the driveway.
These two driveways that you have, the long driveways, okay, you're dedicating the 10 feet, I'm assuming that's going to be flat.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there on, your transition starts. Now, what happens to the side walls of these driveways? Because some of the sections shows walls, but your renderings don't show walls to support this driveway that you're creating, especially on the other portion where it's against the hill. You're going to definitely need some walls to support that. I mean, those are my questions. I'm just trying to see what was the design goal to put these houses further into the hill and so high up.
Okay.
Because by what I'm looking at, there's substantial amount of grading, especially of this house. Was there a thought to reduce that amount of grading?
Actually, the way it started was the pushing it back in our calculation did reduce the grading because if we would lower it, it completely closes up, first of all, any light from the back because of the angle of the slope. And what has to do with driveways, it's in a way follows naturally up the slope, and then we're gonna grade it off, so not to have any walls visual from the street, and landscape it.
Not what I'm reading from your contour lines. That's why I asked the grading plan and the grade.
Grading and correct.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna need some walls, especially on this other house. In some of your sections, you do show some walls. And I'm not sure how these walls vary in height when I'm looking at these driveway straight up.
If you don't mind, which section, which wall do you see in
You
section?
know, I'll take you this section. I mean, actually, the other one too. You got these walls against the driveway. You know, you got all these walls. And we have no...
You need to talk into the mic.
Talk into the
For the
microphone.
record.
Or you could come up here if it's easier.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please come on up, and we could maybe get you the pointer stick if it's available. There it is.
This one for the 1820. 1800 don't have any
You do show it
retaining
on the
wall.
other sections, on the bottom. You have some walls. I'm just trying to see what the height of these walls are actually.
That
gonna
one,
be.
it's like less than 3 feet, maximum it's 3 feet. Because that one, I mean, we don't want to make more grading in the front. That's why if we have, we can make like 2-to-1 slope here also, but that one, that time, it's, we have to make a more grading. That one, just only this, in some of the portion here, we have like small retaining wall. Here we don't have nothing. Because my section, it's come like this, so here we have some retaining wall. After it's illuminate, like from 0 to maximum 3 feet height retaining wall.
So on the 1800 one, according to the applicant, we have a retaining wall of some 0 to possibly 3 feet, maybe more as it goes up the hill. And are you
The same as the
Well, the same
second
one with the other one.
Yeah,
Actually,
same
this
as
one has more
Maybe
than the other
more.
one.
this one has a more because
What's the maximum exposed height of these walls? So 5 feet?
If it's within the setback,
Yes.
it's 5 feet.
5 feet, 5 feet, okay.
The third one, they have again little bit retaining wall here because the driveway has the other slope
Going down.
down. Yeah, this one we push down.
And what happens to the side of the wall? What happens to these walls? What's going on in here? Because
Here
then I
we
see
have,
the...
we have retaining wall here.
So
because
there's a
for the-
retaining wall right in...
Yeah, it's gonna be here. This is this one. This is the retaining wall. We make this one for the trash enclosure. For that one. I mean, we make this one just make a trash enclosure not visible, only for that one.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the grade difference on the first one between the street level and the grade at the garage?
From here,
Until the, until.
if we calculate from here, it's 10 feet. If we calculate from here, it's like 1, 2, 3. It's almost like 20 feet.
20.
And so you've described the retaining walls that are visible on this home, right? As that trash enclosure wall was really,
It's not visible if you. This is this retaining wall. This is the retaining wall for the. This is the building. This is the retaining wall for the trash enclosure.
I understand, okay.
So this one, 5 feet.
I understand. Okay.
Also about the grading, we make a grading, but one of the here we have two slopes. One slope is like this, the other one is like this, because this is like two kind of hill. Yeah. So we make a parallel. No. With this line, see, this is existing. Otherwise, if we're turning this one like this, so first we have to make a more grading. This is go into the hill, so we have to take more dirt. The second one, the facade looking in a neighbor property backyard, which is not nice also. That's why we keep the building like this.
Do we have any more questions for the designer?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mondalia. Thank you.
I also have the street view up. I'm not sure how clear it is for you all, but.
Okay. And were there more pictures than what you presented? I'm more interested in the pictures that go along with the key.
Those are the pictures. That I
Okay,
gave you,
because there was only like
6
6 or 7 pictures.
It's just up and down the street.
Oh, I see, because the 300 linear feet.
That map, I think, is more referring to the mailings.
I understand. Very good. Mr. Marutian?
So, how you doing?
If you would state your name.
My name is Artin Marutian.
Good. And what is your involvement with the project?
Actually, I work with the designer.
Very good. Okay.
And, yeah, so, okay, I have some pictures here.
Since they've already had their allocation of 10 minutes, you're going to get 3 minutes, but
That's fine.
since there's 3 projects and you're the applicant, I think it's fair for you to get a few more minutes to describe it in its entirety. So if you do need more than 3 minutes, let me know.
Definitely. So, basically, they just described what we did, what the concept was with designing the way we did design these 3 structures. We did work as much as possible we could with the staff and took their recommendations into account when we made our changes to conform better with the hillside ordinance. If you can take a look at each building, they sort of step back, right, to fit more. If you had a chance to see the first renderings, it was completely different. So I just want to bring that up. And I have some pictures from the neighbors. I was just going to...
Okay.
We took some of those.
Yeah, you're seeing the final versions of these houses. We've worked with the applicants for, I don't know, maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
The initial designs were significantly different than what you're seeing now.
Okay.
So I just wanted to bring that up. And the one with the pool that's elevated, that was another recommendation that we took into account to minimize the grading. I know the grading is a big concern here with these particular properties. So we did take that into account, and this is what we basically came up with that would work best in our thoughts.
And since you're kind of representing the designer's office, there's been conditions that staff has put forward. Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to review those conditions? Is there some key items you want to point out or talk about or have some thoughts on?
Regarding the retaining walls, I know that's a big issue. Based on the design that we have here, this is basically what we wanted to accomplish, is to reduce them, and I think that we did a pretty good job at it, I think, but others may not. But with that said, we tried to work as much as possible with their recommendations. So whatever recommendations that are there, I thought that at one point we lessened the scale of the building, the mass, right? And we came up with this. So,
okay. Do we have any more questions for the designer's office?
I had a question. Have you met with the neighbors?
I personally have not.
Anybody in your group met with them? Just a question. You don't have to get into it.
Yeah, he's met with a few of the neighbors. Again, some of them were for the project and some of them were against. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we shall move on to the audience. So in no particular order, Mark, Counselor. Good evening.
Good evening.
2 minutes, 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay. As a property owner in the neighborhood of this proposed development, I feel that it is ill-advised to do it. In 2005, we fought a similar development which proposed to remove a lot of square yards of soil from our hillside there. I call it our hillside because everybody in the neighborhood loves that hillside. And it's one of the few remaining green landscapes, green parcels of land in Glendale of its size. And it adds to our neighborhood. And I think it's a very important part of our neighborhood. And I feel that the design of these homes is massive. I feel they are out of keeping with our neighborhood in general. They look more like something that belongs in Malibu, or if you're familiar with the Café Mondrian on Sunset Strip, they look a lot like Mondrian's paintings to me. They're very abstract, almost chunky shapes that all sort of come together. I feel that the hillside shouldn't have that much soil removed also because there's a danger that landslides could occur because of all that building. And also we have water tanks, water storage tanks there at the top of the hill. Any kind of undermining of that soil might create an instability, which could cause those tanks to collapse. And I don't feel that that's a very safe condition for our neighborhood. I think a house of that kind of square footage, which is more than 4,000 square feet in the case of 1800 Marion here, is way out of keeping with our neighborhood. Most of the homes in Adams Hill are under 2,000 square feet. Mine is just about that. So I just feel that this is out of keeping, it's out of scale, and out of style with our neighborhood. In all the years since 2005, it's been 10 years since this was last attempted. And what stopped that project, I understood, was the height of the retaining walls that were necessary. It was considered to be not cost efficient to build retaining walls of that size. In all those years, I'm amazed that none of us have cared about the land enough to put it up to the Bureau of Land Management or the Nature Conservancy. I don't understand where all that stuff is in this. This land is precious to us, and yet it's traded and sold. We don't understand what's going on. In this case, this particular project has been up 6 months in development. I never heard of any neighborhood meetings. We were never informed. We were informed 10 days before this meeting. That's when I got it in my mailbox. 10 days. We've hardly had any time.
Have this kind of
we've hardly had any time.
Sir, I just must make a motion.
Yes, so go ahead.
It's going to be a long evening, and there's a lot of people in the audience, and we realize that a lot of the anti-development group seems to be on this side. So you do not need to clap. We understand your viewpoints, and it's frankly disrespectful for the applicants, and we're going to try to keep this professional. Go ahead, sir.
We have only had 10 days in which to put together our case. I have assembled a petition among our neighbors that's nearly 40 names.
And your time the bell rang, so 3 minutes is up, and I just have to be mindful of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
You all got a copy of the petition.
Yes, we did.
Thank you, Mr. Kizo. For the record, we did. Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Garcia. Good evening.
I've been living in this hill for over 40 years, so I'm an old-timer. In May of 2005, this design review board approved the construction of 3 houses in the very same location. That thing was against also the review board stretch the city building code, allowing higher retention wall and the proximity of the house, the back of the house closer to the retention wall. Everything was done with the blessing of the landowner and against all the neighborhood. So, and now, after 10 years, we come with this new project, which is unbelievable. The house of 1800 is 4,334 square foot. Previous, that is 1,618 square foot bigger than the previous project which was approved by the board. These houses is larger than 2 or 3 houses in the whole Adam Hill, and probably is bigger than most houses, than many houses in Beverly Hills. So that doesn't belong there. It's inconceivable. The next lot, the 1820, is 2,863 square foot. That is 414 square foot bigger than it was previously approved in May of 2005 by the review board. And the 1830 is 3,506 square foot, 714 square foot bigger than it was approved by the board. The required carving of the hill will remove thousands of cubic feet of soil, and the geological and environmental stability of the hill will be undermined with great danger of land movement. Also, the history of the earthquake in this area will exacerbate that particular problem. Furthermore, for many months, this huge project will require the use of larger trucks and machinery with exhaust and deafening noises, putting the neighborhood in great peril. This will make the life of many families in Adam Hill unbearable and very miserable. I'm gonna just, but I'm going to repeat what the guideline for this for area this is. The design guideline for Adam Hill.
That was a 3-minute time limit.
3 minutes already?
No, time flies by. But I'll give you another 10 seconds to wrap it up.
Okay. If you review this project with objectivity, honesty, and integrity, you will decide that this project doesn't belong in this hill.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Next speaker is Andrew Marison.
And while he is coming up, I did look at our safety element in the general plan, and Marion Drive is not a city disaster response route or a county evacuation route.
Thank you, Mr. Kiesel. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Andrew Morrison, and I am both an area resident. I live on Renans, which is on the Los Angeles side of Marion Drive. It becomes Marion Drive when it crosses the Glendale border. I've lived in the neighborhood for 10 years. I've sold real estate in the area for over 15 years, and I was nervous about what was being proposed for this site. This is actually the first time I've seen the renderings of what's proposed on this site. And I can say, both as a resident as well as a realtor, I'm in many ways relieved. The proposal that was before the board at the last go-around, I felt those properties were really out of touch with the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I'm actually pleased to see something with a more architectural style to it. I understand that the size of these proposed properties is not in scale with the surrounding inventory, and I'm a little concerned that there's going to be a market for these properties. I'm assuming that they're going to be sold at some point in time, hopefully, for the developers that are working on this. But I have to say, I would be pleased. I know this property will be developed at some point in time. There's not vacant land in the city, and no one's purchasing property to dedicate it to open space. So if it is going to be developed, I would far prefer to see something of this nature go up in this area. My parcel sits on about 28,000 square feet across the street, and this is right in the sight line of the top pitch of that property. So I was very concerned about, should I decide to develop at some point, what that's going to look like. I'm hoping to preserve it as open space. I live in a property that's 1,400 square feet. Most of the surrounding properties, the average for the area is about 1,500 square feet, given the analysis I did. But again, if they are able to do this, what would be really helpful for us as residents, I think, is probably a little bit more information about the developer and maybe an invitation if there are other projects that have been completed that we can actually see and have a better idea about what they're going to look like would be very helpful for us in just understanding and appreciating what's going up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Martha Higgins.
I've lived in the neighborhood 22 years, and when I saw the signs go up, I was really surprised. I thought there were issues that would prevent that. I know it's been attempted before. My concerns are the environmental impact, the wildlife, impact to wildlife, and traffic.
Thank you. Allison Weber. Oh, I see. Barry Pellisner, Pelliser. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you very much for having this meeting. My name is Barry Pelliser. I live at 1801 Marion Drive, directly across the street from this project. The last gentleman who mentioned there was another rendering of houses before these. I never heard of it or saw anything other than these. And another thing, these gentlemen said they talked to the neighbors. I don't know anyone they talked to, and we live across the street. So I would like to know who they spoke to about this and what they said. My house is at 1,380 square feet. The next door neighbor to me is same thing, 1,380. The next house down, which is across from the second, the 3,000 square foot house, is 800. The house next to that is 14. My biggest problem is, and I've done this, I've stood in front of our houses on our side of the street, and I have sat in front of each one. So just think of you coming out of your front door, and you're not looking across the street now. You're looking up to these monuments. Think of the 800 square foot house. And I've seen now they have driveways, which means they're going to be set back but higher. Now, I know I'm not even going to use the word imposing. I'm going to use intimidating, because we're going to be like in a hole. There's no other. Marion Drive goes down. It's not flat. It goes down. So we're going to be down like this. And I don't think it's legal to come into a neighborhood and actually create a new neighborhood. And I just think, I don't know if you people, I know you're busy, if you could come up there and actually stop, get out of your car, and just stand there, And even with the stakes that they have in the ground, and then you see these pictures, I think these houses are very nicely designed in Malibu. I could see any one of these three on the coast, right on the beach. They're beautiful for that. Not here. Everything else in this neighborhood is just so much. These are 3 times as big as what's there. And I just don't think it's feasible. I just don't think anybody else that, I just wish you'd come up there and see what I'm saying. It's easy to talk about square footage, look at a rendering, but if you're there on the street and every day you come out of your house and there it is with a big driveway going up. So I would wish and hope that you would give this a lot of thought, because these people, I've been there 32 years, and I really do not look forward to seeing a monument, 3 of them, every day. So, thank you.
I have a quick question for you, sir. And since you live across the street and since you focused on the square footage of the project and the surrounding context, what size of a home do you think is appropriate for this?
Well, I would say 2,000 or under, just to stay with the neighborhood and the architecture. Something someone mentioned the white down to a better color so it blends in a little better with the neighborhood. Yeah, fine, but it's still, and now a swimming pool. Is there a swimming pool on Adams Hill? Maybe there is. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay,
I just wanted to get your opinion on that. Thank you very much. Kathy Herenda.
Thanks for giving me an opportunity. I just want to reiterate what everybody else said. Too big, It's too big. They're taking too much earth. They're moving too much earth, which to me just shows that it doesn't really fit the topography. You know, they tried to move it back, but they still had to grade so much. So and I think it's graded too much, and that just shows you that it doesn't belong on that hillside. I think, yeah, Malibu. Move them to Malibu. That's where they belong.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do we have a quantity, grading quantity, cut and fill of any of the?
Yeah, each of the 3 staff reports, I believe it's on the first page, has the amount of cut and fill.
Oh, these, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you just, when you get a moment, just tell us what each number is for each one?
Sure.
Thank you.
Want me to do
And
that?
these are certified or given by civil engineer, and I'm assuming
These are provided by the applicant. Yeah. Okay, so 1800 Marion Drive, the applicant is proposing to cut almost 3,300 cubic yards of earth and fill 5 cubic yards. For 1820, the applicant is proposing to cut just over 1,600 cubic yards and fill 72 cubic yards. And then 1830 Marion, the applicant is proposing to cut about almost 2,500 cubic yards of earth and no fill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiesel. Next speaker is Helene Shapak. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. And thank you for the pronunciation of my name. That was amazing. I'm a neighbor. I received notice of this. In general, I appreciate the design of these buildings. And given the lot size being as generous as it is, the FAR is actually quite modest. But that is looking at these things completely out of context to the surrounding area. In particular, it's very deceiving when you look at 1830 to realize that the hill just slams down to the south end. I think there's going to be at least 3 or 4 neighbors backed up there in their single-family homes down below the hill who will now no longer receive any privacy in their backyards or the rear section of their homes. This will be looming massively over them. I actually have less of a concern with 1800 because the hillside at this point starts to go into this curve and backs into a darker area that it would be less noticeable. But for, I think it's 1820 and 1830, the scale is so dramatically out of proportion. And sitting up higher on the hillside, in any other situation, I would actually appreciate that. But it is going to be quite a visual shock when you put that next to the surrounding inventory in the community. 2 other quick points that I just wanted to make. This is a wildlife corridor, even though we don't have to acknowledge that, but it exists. Coyote dens are just at the top of this hillside. And if you did approve of this, I would like to see a couple things. One, to ensure that they didn't block off passage for the coyotes that come down off the hill. And the other is to find some way to mitigate the massive intrusion on all the downslope neighbors to the south who will be terribly impacted by this, and I can only imagine their property values being diminished by this. Thank you.
Miss?
Yes.
I have one quick question for you. You referred to the first home as possibly being located in a manner that was acceptable. And I just wanted to get your opinion on this third home, which is actually placed very much closer to the street and lower. What were your thoughts on this one? Because it seems as though the third one is placed closer to the street and at a lower elevation.
If you see the hill, it isn't this, it's this. And there are homes here. So even closer to the street, which is better, is still at this. Is this one 3 stories? 3 stories plus 20 feet of hill sitting right on top of the house below. You should see the visual of it. It
No, I
would speak
understand.
volumes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Margaret Hammond.
Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Gentlemen. My name is Margaret Hammond. Been a resident of Adams Hill for almost 60 years. I've fought for that hill to keep it the way it is, rather than get it torn up and dug into and everything else. I'm sure you realize your duties, what they are, under Title 30 of the Design Review Board. The particular one that is G, to ensure single-family design which is compatible with the character inherent within the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, what they're suggesting or wanting to build there is not. I mean, the homes in there are 90 years old. I mean, I happen to know because I own a couple of them. And some of them are older than that. They're over 100 years old. And you're going to put these in that area. The people that want to live there feel that this is a wonderful neighborhood, very different from anywhere else. When I rent, I have people lined up wanting to live on Adams Hill because of its character. Not really even for what kind of a home. They don't care that they're 90 years old. The other thing that bothers me is about the soil removal. If they're going to remove 7,500 whatever, yards, square feet, whatever, that sounds like an awful lot of dirt. And I remember back, I don't know whether it was the 60s or 70s, the fact that with Forest Lawn, I am on the side over from that where this building is proposed. But I remember that Forest Lawn, there was a problem when it came a big rain, like the El Niños they're talking about now, and it ended up with the walls that weren't high enough or whatever, that the coffins floated down into the front yards of the people in that area. You can look it up. It's in the paper. So we don't want to look at that kind of a thing happening with the dirt being taken away and that the houses end up sliding down the hill, do we, onto the other people down below. And, I mean, water conservation. Who's going to water these? How are they going to water these lots? How are they going to keep them from eroding? I just had to have the one property that I have completely cleared, and it cost me a lot of money because with the drought, the trees died, whatever, it had to be cleared out. Now I'm worrying about erosion. I'm looking at a lot across the street from me that's covered with black, whatever it is, plastic, and little bags hanging all over it because they're concerned about what could happen. Because so much of the trees have died in there, and the growth that was ground cover, whatever. I mean, I live there. I experience it. You don't live there. You haven't experienced what has happened, what can happen on the hill. I mean, it's very vital that you look at this and take into context the fact of what has gone on in the past, the history of things that have happened. From the removal of dirt and from the trees dying and from the ground cover dying. I've experienced it on my own house. So I'm just saying, please keep in mind the fact that the neighborhood needs to be protected.
Thank you very much.
Would appreciate it very much. Thank you.
The next speaker is Nancy Pellizier.
Pardon? Oh.
No, I'm just naming the next speaker.
You want to get rid of me? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond.
Always pleasure seeing you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Pellissier, and I live with my husband across the street from the largest home that's being built. I guess probably the biggest part of it with me is the heart. You know, if the charm of the neighborhood will be gone. I mean, they're wonderful-looking structures, but to me, they're not charming. As my husband explained, and a lot of people have talked about, first of all, the part of the land that it's built on is at least 2 stories high. I don't know what the actual measurements are, but then you put a 3-story house on top of something else that's practically 2 stories high. You're talking about monumental. I mean, when you're standing in the street and you're looking up. I'm from South Dakota, And when those stakes went up and I stood across the street, it reminded me of Mount Rushmore. And that's not what we, I mean, it's not funny, really, because it is scary when you think about it. Again, I'm not knocking the way these I want to call them buildings rather than homes, but the architecture is beautiful, but it doesn't belong in our neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker is Arlene Vidor. Good evening.
Thank you very much. My name is Arlene Vidor. I live on Lower Marion Drive, not in the immediate area, but I feel that what's good for the other part of Adams Hill is good for all of our neighborhood, and that's what's good for Glendale and its future. I think the three properties proposed don't comply with the principles and intent of the City of Glendale's design review guidelines, which are supposed to be considered the minimum threshold for good design. I will go through this very quickly because I tried to speak to the specifics in the design guidelines. I think the design is kind of poor in that it's out of scale, incompatible with adjacent fabric of the neighborhood, and all three are of disproportionate size, which is very evident in the aerial photographs that are in the package. Livability is an issue in the DRB guidelines. Livability is in jeopardy. You've heard it across the street from the properties because they're too large in relationship to the narrowness of the street and the properties lining the opposite side. The houses violate a few principles of design, I think. There appears to be, in my opinion, no regulating principle of design in any of the three houses. They're all very busy. The heavy components sometimes are on the top as opposed to on the bottom. 1830 is an example of that, where the house, instead of getting lighter as it goes up, gets a little bit heavier. You've got heavy horizontal parapets, especially for 1820, which is exacerbated by their stark whiteness, and I think you've already addressed that. That creates a chunky, monolithic feeling on such a narrow street, which is sure to overwhelm the neighbors. The window openings and specific design features aren't aligned vertically or horizontally, and the staggered placement doesn't seem to follow any kind of a pattern in any of the houses. There doesn't appear to be a design relationship between each story of the three houses. You've got a variety of materials creating what looks like, kind of crazy-making visual chaos that will not be pleasant to look at, given the size and position across from the neighbors. Multiple balcony styles, railings, parapets with railings, plexiglass, windows and balconies of different grid patterns competing with one another. In other words, the divided lights that you see in the garage, the windows, the doors are all of different sizes. On 1800 and 1820, the driveway materials seem to be sympathetic to the house design aesthetically, but on 1830, you've got a driveway that looks like it belongs to another house. I love contemporary architecture, and I'm so happy to see people building infill that is reflective of the 21st century. You can even do that in a designated historic district. But this does not preclude the necessity to follow good design principles. We don't have to copy the existing architecture, but we have to be sympathetic to it, pay homage to it, and just do what we can. I've got a lot more, but I'm not going to say anything else.
Thank you very much. John Bahagi.
Wehage.
Oh,
I know.
I apologize.
It's German, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting us to your coronation. Sorry I didn't bring a gift. My wife and I live at 3883 Wawona. We are 5 houses down. We also own 3882 across the street, so we're impacted for both properties. We are both really excited about this circumstance and really looking forward to inviting both the builders and these 3 properties to the neighborhood. And I'm sorry, Nancy, I love you. So first of all, I think they create a fabulous statement for the neighborhood. I do think that all 3 properties bring something that we don't have. The scale is actually something that works very well on this hillside. My property is 25,000 square feet. I have a 2,500 square foot home with a pool up above all of this on just simply behind, with a large retaining wall as well on the Los Angeles side. And I'm actually for the pool, and we gain so much enjoyment of it. So if it's possible, I know the families that ultimately live here would enjoy it as well. I have spoken to the builders and walking over. They've been nothing but kind and understanding. I've talked to them about things that the design board has so thoughtfully discussed, and that I won't reiterate, but I think that all of the notes from the design board were very thoughtful and very useful, and I agree with virtually all of them, other than the pool. The recommendations that I'd like to discuss really quick, there are power lines there that as the street gets widened, if those could get buried, that would be spectacular. I think that it would only add to the location. The water features, as noted, would be great if they all go. Widening of the street is almost necessary for the circumstance, just for ingress and egress. It's actually quite a narrow street in the neighborhood. And the architectural renderings all show trees that currently don't exist. And I'd love to see, and I don't know if it's possible, if there's a way to make sure that that circumstance is followed through. The hillside erosion, I live with hillside erosion all the time. I just planted 6 trees. Actually, I just planted 11 trees in the last couple of days for this exact purpose, and would love to make sure that that happens along the way. Also of concern in the neighborhood, not too far down around the block, there's a house that started and was never completed. And I don't know if there's a completion bond or something to that effect to make sure this doesn't happen again, but it's a blight in the neighborhood. And if there's anything that the panel can do to make sure that doesn't happen, it would be fabulous. A note topographically on the last house, the one far right, I noticed that there was a discussion of tilting this house. Topographically, the grade on that side is significantly less than on the other two. So given that the grade is not as steep on that side, I'm not sure that that's as necessary. And I also want to note that moving them closer to the street also only, I think, creates an even bigger circumstance, having them set back further. I know that was discussed earlier, but actually having them set further back up the hill and off works quite well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the speaker. The uncompleted, just this quick side question, the uncompleted home, what's the address? Do you know?
I don't know.
Can you get it to us?
100%. Who should I send it to?
Do we know whether it's in the city of Los Angeles?
I think it's Glendale.
5 Corona?
1255 Corona. Thank you.
For the record,
Yeah.
we
Glendale. There's
can't
actually
have
one
any more
across the street,
cross
too.
communication, but 1255 Corona.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Rondi Werner. Welcome.
My name is Rondi Werner. I'm president of the Adams Hill Neighborhood Association, and I've lived in Glendale for over 30 years. In December of 2013, I participated in a series of meetings called the Planning Process Streamlining Committee, and several times I raised objections when I felt that the power of the public was being handed off too much to the city's staff. And I was assured that after a year that they would look at this process and evaluate its effectiveness. That was 2.5 years ago, and that has not yet happened. I think these projects are a perfect example of why we need to reevaluate that process. Part of the streamlining was to remove the conditional use permit requirement. So these projects, all 3 of them would have had to go through that process because they exceed the threshold of 1,500 cubic yards of dirt being removed, and one of them also exceeds the 50% slope threshold. So I feel that the boundaries are being pushed. I receive all the notices for the entire city. I'm seeing a lot of development that I'm very concerned about, and they're going straight to administrative design review. And this one, I think, is the most alarming one that I've seen. But I feel like these kinds of projects are problematic when they're in a hillside and there's all that grading, and they deserve the extra scrutiny that a CUP process provides. So I'm urging you all, since they're coming straight to you, to please protect the public from this type of development that is injurious to the property values and the safety and the well-being of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle Brazel. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
My name is Danielle Brazel, and I live at 1620 Marion Drive. And I'm actually a relatively new member to the Adams Hill community. My partner and I bought the house, which is just about a 1,500 square foot home. But it's great because you can see views from, downtown Los Angeles, and you can see views down to the San Fernando Valley. The neighborhood is lovely. Most of the homes are just about 1,500 square feet. I'm opposing this project, and I'm opposing this project because in reviewing the design guidelines, which were adopted, I guess, in 2011, this seems on a number of accounts, and I think many people have spoken so eloquently before me, but to be really out of scale with the guidelines that were adopted for the city. And I'll tell you that I moved, my partner and I moved from Silver Lake, one, because it was completely unaffordable for us to live in Silver Lake at the time, and we wanted to buy, but we also wanted to have a neighborhood that had the character, that had the community, that had the safety. And I would say that that's really what the Adams Hill neighborhood has provided us. Now, this particular hill, man, I run up that hill every day, and I'm telling you, that thing is sleep. Have you guys gone to the site? So in looking at the design guidelines, you can really see that this just completely obliterates the hill. And I don't think that the design itself is kind of integrated into the hillside itself. So, I mean, I think that you have a pretty difficult position because everything, of course, is up to interpretation. But what's really exciting is that the design guidelines that were adopted by the city seem pretty clear. And anything that falls outside of that seems like you have to uphold. So I wanted to go on record. I sent a letter. Thank you for your service to our city. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Segal.
Hi, my name is Barry Siegel. I live at 1711 Marion Drive. I've lived there for 24 years. And I know you're looking for something different here because everybody said, what they said. I'm on this side. And I agree with everything everybody else said. But what kind of disturbs me, and I wasn't going to speak, but I heard it tonight, people are calling this a development. And we don't have developments on the Hill. They're individual houses. That's what makes living in that neighborhood wonderful because it's not developed. So in my opinion, this is like putting up, 200 condos in that space. There's going to be 3 houses exactly looking, very, very similar. And I just think it's going to just really ruin the entire sense of the neighborhood. So it's the development aspect of it that really bothers me. Thank you.
Shirley Ann Hill.
Hello.
Welcome.
My name is Shirley Ann Hill, and I've lived in Adams Hill since 1970, on Adams Hill. I love it. I moved here to this community because it's lovely, it has character homes, it's quaint, and it's different. And I'm also a realtor. And I heard the gentleman who does think that this is absolutely perfect for the area. As a realtor in Glendale, you see, we're talking about 2 different cities. We have to understand that this is the very end of Glendale, where Marion Drive goes in to Los Angeles. But Marion Drive represents the entire city of Glendale. We're part of Glendale, and our character runs in tune with that. And one of the reasons the homes sell so well in Adams Hill, people are looking for the character homes, the homes that aren't development type homes. The views are spectacular. Now, this particular end, as you go down to the end, obviously the views are a little different, a little less, but it's a hillside area. All kinds of views, the peekaboo views, the big views, the everything views. We can even see the ocean sometimes when the days are right. So I'm not talking on the technical side as much. You've heard everything you need to hear about topography, compatibility, taking dirt out, and all of that. I'm just talking about the quality of our homes, the value of them, keeping the values up, not ruining that, and the fact that Adams Hill is desirable for the types of homes we have, and not particularly this type of home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Max Edgin.
Hello.
Good evening.
My name is Max Edgin. I'm a resident at 3865 Wawona, which is right below where all this construction would be happening. My concerns, this is the first time I've actually seen any renderings of what's going on, and the notice that we received about 10 days ago is the first I've heard about this at all. I've been a resident there for about 10 years, just going on about 10 years. I've heard talk of people developing on that property, and of course understand since it's open that something was going to happen at some point to it. My concerns are for safety. The erosion on that hill is dramatic. We have a kind of cut slope from that goes right into our property, and that over the last 2 or 3 years has been getting worse as far as erosion. We have to go up there to locate animals sometimes onto the hill itself, and it's almost unfathomable to get up onto that. It breaks away. So my concerns are anyone building right above me could theoretically cause a major issue with all of that stuff coming onto our property. Sorry, I can move the microphone there. So my concerns are that the houses aren't to be built farther up, but be built towards the street. The staging that's going on right now that shows us kind of stilts or what's going on with the properties that are physically there right now are all towards the street. And thusly, I didn't really have that much of a problem with it. But the fact that they're going higher up into the hill, which is, I think, even a huge safety issue alone, could cause major problems to our property, and I will fight that legally if I have to. So my concerns are just that it's done safely. And that we have the ability to be able to keep our properties from getting, from the hill destroying my property, and people can live cohesively in that area. And that's about it. The city services, I know, someone brought up emergency. There were some fires at one point up on that hill, and people were going through this exact property area that they're doing construction to get to those fires. How they would be able to do that beyond that with this construction here, I don't know. They can't get through our properties to go right to the hill, so they'd have to go through these properties anyway to do that. And that's something that I would assume they have taken under consideration. I would definitely review that, because there is some stuff with how services get into that area for fire protection that may need that area. And I'm sure they would be a good resource as well to speak to them as far as like what concerns may be happening with a fire. But like I said, safety is my only issue at this point with that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one speaker card that does not have a name on it, so if you filled one out, yes, come on up and
because I desperately hate public speaking. That's probably my first line. I hate this.
And so if you would afterwards just fill out your name.
Yes. Would you like me to do that?
No,
now?
you could do it afterwards.
That's how horrified I am to be up
If
here.
you would just state your name for the record
My
and
name is
welcome.
Melanie Rofel. I live directly below. What I wish these renderings would depict is what the hillside. This looks at Marion basically this way, but what it's not seen is the side hill view that I live directly below. And I have lived there for 15 years. It has to be a record for a renter, but that's how much I love this neighborhood. And I can't implore upon you enough how unsafe that hill is right now as far as nobody digging on it. If you guys could please just go and just look at the other side of the hill from the Los Angeles side, you'll see the sheerness of it. And my neighbor, it's no joke. It's super sheer, and any digging on that side, I have serious concerns for the safety, because I've seen 15 years worth of how much dirt comes down every year with no digging whatsoever. And safety is my huge concern, because if any of that shifts, we don't have huge backyards. It's straight into our bedrooms. And 1830 will look directly into my bedroom window as well as my neighbor who is on the corner of Marion and Wawona, it will completely fishbowl us. And I know the hill is steep, but these are not accurate renderings of what the hill really looks like. I really implore you guys to get better pictures of what it looks like on the Wawona side, because it would answer a lot of these questions, I feel, about the scale and the size of scale and what would be appropriate. I have real concerns about dust abatement, and I'd like a geology report that would be accurate from an independent contractor. I don't feel this is going to be a very safe project, and I am in this isn't across the street from me, I'm directly below this project.
I think.
No, that's my neighbor.
Neighbor.
I'm,
The blue?
I would be here, there.
Right here.
Max, my neighbor's there, and then, I mean, there's nothing holding that up. You would see it, if you could go, you could see it really accurately. If you are going to go ahead and do this, I ask that there is a sumac bush up there. If that could be left, that's the only privacy I'm going to have, is that bush. But everything else, I mean, there's 2 water tanks. There's the Glendale tank and the LA water tanks that are up there. There's a lot at risk here. This isn't just, I don't like the way the buildings look. I'm honestly, other than forgetting to fill my name out on the card, I'm concerned that I'm going to have to move, and that's how unsafe I really think this could be. So I just urge that you go to the site and look at it, because that doesn't even show like how steep it really is. That makes it look watered down. This is all very, well, I mean, you can kind of see it, but you can't see the sheerness. It still looks like it's just a nice sloping, gentle hill.
Thank you. And here's your name card. If you would just fill it out, and you could give it to staff afterwards. Yes. Do we have anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? Mary? And if you would just fill out a speaker card afterwards.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And state your name for the record.
My name is Mary Baldwin. I have lived on this hill longer than Margaret. Oh. So I'm going to bring up the rear here. The renderings to me are not accurate, and I'm having a real problem with it. This is the first time I've seen them. Thanks. As you can tell, we love our neighborhood. We're fearful for this kind of development. It's so far out of whack. I've lived there so long, and this is known as Coyote Gulch. We walk the loop every night. This is part of our walking routine. And having looked at this since I was a little child, this is probably the worst, the largest development I've seen. These houses are just far too large, and you get that. I know that. But the last ones were rebuffed because actually the retaining walls had to be so big because of all the concerns people have said that aesthetically the design review said we can't do this. It'll be safe, but we just can't do this. So the water towers are not depicted in any of this. There's a whole lot more greenery than has ever been there, and I can safely say 60 years. So I would urge you to give this some serious thought and really reject what is happening in front of us. It's our hill. We love it, and we don't want to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would afterwards fill out a card and hand it to staff. I believe there was one other person. Yes, please. If you would state your name for the record and then fill out a card afterwards.
My name is Normie Winfrey. I live in 1811 Marion Drive, across to the 1800 building right there. I call them building because it's like a building. I'm really concerned because we have a lot of privacy in that neighborhood, and we have a lot of green, the mountain like that. And now I'm just going to see buildings in there. So if I feel sentimental, and also I feel like there is no safety because I live in the hill, and the dirt is coming very easily. It's so loose. So I feel like with that it's going to be more dangerous. I don't feel safety in there anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, is there one more person that would like? Yes. If you would come up, state your name for the record, and then also fill out a card if you would afterwards, miss.
Yeah, and I'll do the same. My name is Bob Brunel. We've lived in the neighborhood for about 15 years on Aguilar Street. And I would say, I understand that a lot has been said, and there's been very little feedback to the group, so I'm not sure exactly where this stands.
Our time is coming. We let everyone speak,
Okay.
and then we close the public portion. And
Because
then
that's an area of great interest to me. What's going to happen beyond this point? But I can
Stick
tell
around
you.
and you'll hear.
Okay, I've been there for about 15 years. I like walking a lot. I like climbing hills. To go up this hill, except in the area that you're showing it, this doesn't show the grade of it. You have to go up on all fours to get to the top. That's the only way you get to the top of this hill. It's that steep. It's got 2 huge water tanks, I would suspect with hundreds of gallons of water in them. It's only a matter of time. It appears to be a very high-risk scenario for anyone down the bottom. And that's basically where we are. We're down the bottom around the corner a little bit. If the hill ever starts to really go, it's going to go. Those tanks are going to come down. A lot of people are going to be injured. Property is going to be destroyed. And I don't sense a level of, I haven't been here for 3 minutes yet, I don't think.
I may not have stopped the last one.
In all due respect, I understand you've got a tough job to do. This seems like a very extreme project for the area, especially if I live where this gentleman does. If I stepped out of my house and I'm looking at basically a 6 or 7 story building based upon the elevation of those stakes, really not, that destroys the ambience of the area totally. We're not against development. I think it's a fantastic job the architects did, but really not for the area. We're also concerned about the well-being of the wildlife that currently lives in the area. And we're curious to know what's going to be done to protect them during this process. We're also curious to know what the time frame of the project is, start to finish. Thank you very much.
Try to get those answers for you. Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Okay. And so the applicant's team, consultants, et cetera, have an opportunity for rebuttal. And so who would, from your team, like to speak? Yes, Mr. Mondalian. You would state your name for the record. And combined, let's go with 5 minutes combined overall.
I wouldn't take 2 minutes. Okay. Ron Mondalian, consultant with the applicant. Just want to add about the distance from the street, why the building's that far in. The designer tried to balance the percentage of the driveway. Basically, if you bring it closer, the house goes lower, and it completely digs into the hill from the back. So it basically increased the height of the retaining wall in the back. Otherwise, there's no way to meet the slope requirements of City of Glendale to get it in the garage. And a second thing for the neighbors, I would like to say, so obviously there will be very reputable civil engineering companies and geological engineers hired to make sure that the hill is stable. And from my experience, which is almost 18 years, structures like this actually stabilize the hill rather do the other way. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else from the consultant group want to use up your remaining time? No? Yes, if you would state your name for, thank you.
Yeah. So they're concerned with regards to the actual stability of the hillside. I personally have many years of experience stabilizing hillsides. We've actually recently done one in Los Feliz about a year and a half ago, where somebody destroyed the hillside, unpermitted work, and we were called in to stabilize the hillside. So we do have the experience with that type of work. And he's right in saying that building tends to stabilize further if there needs to be any stabilizations, because we are able to stop erosion in that general area with that. So just wanted to put your guys' mind at ease. No matter how you guys go on this, we can take care of it and make sure everything is safe.
Thank you.
You got it.
And so with that, I'd like to close the public portion.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I have a couple of questions for staff. May I ask?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Gazel, I have a quick question. In our packets, there are some things that we do get in other presentations. We don't have them in these. One of them being a grading plan. Is that something that's a requirement before they come up to design review board, or is that the optional item?
I would need to look at the application requirements. We didn't receive one in this case.
And then the same question in reference to soil report for Hillside. We see them sometimes. In this particular case, I don't see it.
I don't think a soils report is required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Lekian, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Go ahead and get started on this. We are dealing with 90,000 square feet of total area divided into 3 homes or 3 lots. These are legal lots, and these are lots that have been divided and designed for development. And it is unfortunate, some people don't like the designation of development, but you develop a house in these lots, and that's what it is. A lot of questions and comments has gone into the stability and a lot of discussions, and we have over 50 signatures here, and I'm assuming there are several more as we haven't gotten the signatures here. So one of the things that I want to bring up in a lot of cases, and this is advice to the applicant, is whenever you have a project like this and whenever you are proposing such a development, my suggestion has always been to deal with these kinds of issues with the neighborhood and reduce the number of 50 signatures of opposing this project behind the public arena, and a forum or some sort of a local meeting would have helped you in this case and kind of present all the conditions and all the situations and all the questions, and you would have been able to resolve them. Unfortunately, this is not the place to answer all the questions and all the concerns. So a lot of question has gone into the stability. It is unfortunate we don't have the soils report nor grading plans. That would have helped us understand a little bit, being that we will be looking at the conditional use permit portion that has been eliminated, and we are looking at that. The foundation, the notion that I got from most of the neighbors that were here, they were concerned that if the hill fails, the building will fall down. Building is not going to sit on a loose dirt. It's going to sit on a foundation. The foundation is going to be designed by engineers. It's going to be reviewed by the city, and it's going to be approved by the city engineers, and it's going to be inspected both by the civil engineer, and the city inspectors. So for me to set aside the design, the massing, and all that, for me to approve a project or deny a project or return it for redesign only for the stability of the project that may or may not have, I don't think it's in our purview to address that in this arena. It's something that I am not capable of addressing. I am assuming that it will be taken care of during the engineering process. As far as the hillside guidelines, and that's an interesting discussion. I'm very well familiar with the hillside guidelines, and looking at this project, and I'm trying to basically start as a clean slate and look at this project, say that we would follow what the neighbors are suggesting, look at the neighborhood, and majority of the buildings around Adams Hill is in a smaller footprint, square, in a taller format, sitting in a much less of a boundaries that these proposed projects are proposing. These are more of a flatter, two-story, a broader, wider sections. So I think if we take the the massing of what we have in general, in average massing of the buildings around, and we set this on the property or right next to the drive or next to the street level, I don't think it's going to meet the hillside guidelines. It will meet the neighbors' requirements, a neighborhood requirement, but it will not, in my opinion, they will have a lot of problems addressing some of the major conditions that it's in the hillside guidelines. Some of these sections that they've proposed and they've provided do follow the stepping of the biggest concern that we have when we are proposing against the hill rather than downhill is to nestle the building within the hill itself, so it will follow the contour, it will follow in. Now the question is the size of these buildings. Yes, they are big, and the big question is, do we look at the FAR or do we look at the size of the buildings? Well, the style that they have chosen, I am a modernist, and if no one knew about this, so I do appreciate well-designed modern buildings. But again, it's my responsibility to look at every design as it sits in its context. So looking at these and looking at the neighborhood that it's going in, that's a question that I need to ponder upon a bit more, and while we deliberate on this. As far as the hillside, as far as the materials that they're using, as far as the stepping of the buildings, I think they're all meeting the requirements that we have set forth. Does it fit within the neighborhood? Does it match what some of the buildings or all the buildings that are in the Adam? I don't think it does. Would it make sense to move these buildings closer to the street level? Would it reduce the massing? I don't think so. Would it be easier for them to push the building down, make this less massive? I don't think it's going to change in a sense of eliminating this. I think the big question is, do neighbors want anything to be built here or not? Because it doesn't matter what it's being proposed, it's going to look massive. We're going to have issues, and that's the big question. And I don't think we're here to say you can build or you cannot build. I think we're here to look at the design and address it in that fashion. I would have probably kind of changed the style a bit more between the buildings rather than keeping them all the same. I think that would have been a little bit a better choice, but I think that's something that we can talk about, and that's easily solvable. But in the bigger picture, I think there are a lot of concerns about, do we allow them to do this? Is this meeting the requirements and the hillside guidelines? And that's the big question that I think we're here to address. So.
Thank you. Chartian.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to agree with some of those comments, and where I have some poignant differences, I'll point them out, but I agree with most of those comments. I think it would have, and I'm going to highlight a few points, but for brevity, not repeat most. I think it would have been very helpful in this particular project to have a grading plan. I think that would address our conditional use obligations and allow us to understand, moving this volume of dirt. Also, there was a suggestion that was made by one of the speakers about, looking at the dedication and the treatment of the power lines. I don't think that's in our purview, but I would want to make sure that the power lines don't end up on the other side of the street or something of that nature. So just for the record, I think we should be cognizant of that. I can't recommend that they go underground or anything like that, but I think we need to be cognizant of that. I had issues with the landscaping plan and the suggested sizing of some of the trees. The renderings show very nice, lush front yards, side yards, and backyards, but my experience with owning hillside property is that it's hard to get trees to take, especially if you're starting at, I believe, a 5-gallon size. So you need to, I think, revisit some of those. A soil report is not required, but I think that may have addressed some of the people's concerns. My bigger issues are the overall footprint of these properties. The size is large, but the footprint is I think, a little too large, especially on 1830 over here. This is 1830, correct? You have this huge front yard deck. It hangs over into past the driveway. I'm sorry, the garage, and it also creates additional mass. So there's some massing from the footprints of some of these from the three properties. I think they can be addressed. I would like to see an overall reduction in some of the building mass. There's a lot of volumes that are just too large. Again, going to the 1830 building is probably the biggest offender of that. I will address the swimming pool issue as well. I think that understanding the amount of cut that's going to happen because of the swimming pool and the surrounding areas would be interesting to explore and have more information on as we're considering the conditional use aspect. Because I think that although it's great to have a swimming pool, in some scenarios it doesn't work. So I would support staff's recommendation as to 1800, and I would consider staff looking into that recommendation as to the other properties as it affects overall cut. Because I'm having a real tough time justifying the amount of cut for this project. I understand it, but I'm having a tough time justifying it. I agree with the materials. I think that they're appropriate. Overall style. I think that one of the things that you stated, which I agree with a lot, is that I think there should have been some differentiation in the styles. I can't sit here and say that you shouldn't have, done a modern home. Some homes were built 100 years ago, some 90 years ago. New homes are going to be built for the time. There's homes that were built in my neighborhood in the 40s, some built in the teens, some are built more recently, and they each have their own unique style. They fit in, they complement the neighborhood. Here, though, when you have three properties that are side by side that look identical, it creates this, developmental feel, even though it's just three homes. And I think that that's something that I would want to explore some more. With that, I think I've said enough of my preliminary comments.
Thank you, Mr. Churchny. Now, Mr. Mardian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with some of the comments, but I do disagree with some of them, though. The whole point of the hillside design guidelines is to minimize grading, minimize retaining wall. By creating a program of such that, living room, 4 bedrooms and so forth, and pushing it into hill, I think it's dictating the amount of grading that is being removed. Mr. Malikan, it may not be possible to bring all this to the street and maybe not meet the guidelines, but I think the square footage and the program is dictating on all these lots that, we have this program that we want to create on this lot, but yet it's going to require X amount of grading cubic yard. I think one of the speakers said, and I totaled it, we're excavating total of 7,300 cubic yards, and I don't, see that on these lots. I think it's excessive to the street. One thing also about the hillside design guidelines that I like to mention, and I appreciate the fact that he's going into this direction of design, stepping back, but stepping back is not occurring in the floor. I mean, I'm looking at all these houses, they're all flat, level, straight. He's not, playing around with the volumes of the house to comply with the grade. Now, I'm looking at these, they're all straight lines. Again, I appreciate the style. Yeah, I agree with you, it should be differentiated. But I think my biggest problem is that I think I asked that earlier, and you guys also asked, is the grading plan. It would have helped me answer a lot of my questions about the grading, especially when it comes to these driveways. Because when we have these driveways, even when we have the grading plan, none of these walls come up the way we anticipated to be. And my decision would have, I would have made a better judgment on this if I had a grading plan. See if all these driveways work. I have a 10-foot driveway that I'm going to climb up, 70 feet or so in length, with a 10-foot and turn into this to go up. I think has a little it's problematic to me. And my biggest issue is to reduce mass and to reduce grading. And I don't think in the past, I've been here for a few years now, I don't think we've approved a building that had 3,000 cubic yard of earth removed. I don't recall that. Is there, a record of what's the...
I don't, we would have to go back to the various houses we've approved.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things, and I don't want to talk for the applicant because I haven't seen the grading, but one of the things that I've noticed on the sections were the existing and the new grade.
Okay.
And when you look at the new grade and what they've indicated, I think the intent is to bring it to 2-to-1 slope, which is what it's the stable condition, that stability, creating the stability of the soil that you want to have without even having a soils engineer or a grading engineer. I think by doing that, they may have increased the amount of grading to stabilize the earth. And I'm not talking for them, but I'm just looking at the section there, and that's what I'm assuming.
Lower left section.
Lower left section, because there's quite a bit of dirt being removed, and I'm like, why are they removing that? Why don't they just raise the retaining wall behind it and create a green deck or something, over the roof? But when you look at the information they put on the new grade, which is 2-to-1, I think that may be one of the reasons that they have such an excessive grading. I don't know.
There's a lot of other ways you could cut the grading down. The house on the, if I may, Mr. Chair, the house on the 1800, we got such, the garages, and they have such depth going back in. I don't know how many, that could be avoided. Same thing in here. This house only requires 2-car garage. Now, I'm even pushing this garage further into the hill, creating that other space, and putting the stairs back, where all that could be eliminated. That reduces grading and in turn reduces the hill, the retaining wall in the back where the proposed pool is. Now, there's a lot of excess grading.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying
that is not necessary on this.
Some of these have been probably stabilizing.
And I have, the reason I'm really being picky on the grading plan, because I don't know what's going on with these walls. You have this, and then you have, on the side plan, you have all these walls on the side that are not shown. And that's a substantial amount. That's a substantial wall. And those are on the side yard. I don't know if they're going to meet the retaining wall heights. But as far as style, I appreciate where he's going with this design. It could be refined, simplified a little more, but it needs to break. Perfect example in here, you're showing me the grade is going in there. This should come down or this should go up, create a break in the building to break this monotonous mass. And the same thing applies to all of them. Yeah, they do go back, and I agree with that. That's meeting the intent, but to me, it's not meeting the intent of the guidelines in full. And I wish I had the grading plan. I would have made a better judgment today, but as it stands, I'm not ready to support this project, or any of them, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Marty. And Mr. Benlian?
I'm having some really hard time understand what's going on, and that's similar because we don't have a grading plan. And I think it's one of these projects that's a little bit complex because the applicant, by trying to follow the hillside guidelines and stepping back the building and going back into the contours and conforming with the contours, he's creating another issue, which is removing substantial amount of cubic yards, and that's the portion I'm having a hard time with. In terms of overall design, I actually like it. I think it's. I think the materials, they kind of go together. It can get some refinement here and there, but overall the design is fine. I'm just having some hard time with the 3,000 cubic yard of cut. So that's about it.
Thank you. Well, as chair, I get to speak last, and I get the luxury of really listening to everybody and getting different viewpoints. So you, Mr. Mardine, have enjoyed that for a year. Now it's my turn.
Yeah, it's your turn to
to think about a project that much longer, as my colleagues have talked about it. I think overall, you're developing, or you're proposing to develop, in a very sensitive part of Glendale, and there are certain neighborhoods which are notorious for having a lot of individuals that are passionate about their hillsides, their construction typology, the design, etc. And this is one of them. So I do suggest that some outreach with the neighborhood could be a big benefit in this scenario. At the same time, I absolutely support the development of these areas. It's owned by a private individual. Private individual pays taxes, etc. They were for sale. Anybody in this crowd could have purchased it, but they didn't. And so there is a right for the owner to develop them in a sensitive manner, in the right manner. And so sometimes as these projects come in front of us, the two sides are pretty far apart, but as the process kind of goes forward, compromises are made from everyone's point of view. And that is key. I think it's very important for the community to realize that you need to have some compromises made and that something will occur there. And at the same time, you use that to try to get the most that you could get in a sensitive design, and that's where that collaboration comes in. I think some of the thoughts that were presented today and talked about by my colleagues are certainly going to give the applicant a lot to think about. And I think if I was sitting in the crowd and I was listening, I would have kind of heard a couple of different things, right? You have the modernist that is taking a certain approach, and then you have others that are taking a different approach. But that said, I think there is absolutely a lot of credence in what Mr. Bellingham was saying, in that if you do follow the hillside design guidelines, which is saying step back the building as you go up into the hillside, the more you step back into the hills to go up into the hillside to follow the design guidelines, you are inherently grading more. And in this specific scenario, the way the hillside is set up, it's amplified because of the sheer verticality. And from what I sensed, the applicant had started out with a project that was closer to the street, and then through a collaboration of 6 months with staff had done the right thing, which is push them towards the hillside design guidelines and adopting those methodologies. And now they've moved back, and now there's a grading issue. So it is a bit of a conundrum. If you look at it from our point of view of sitting up here and trying to weigh all the viewpoints, I would hope you start to appreciate what we go through and how we assess these things. And so, but I do think the hillside design guidelines is the right approach, and I do think staff had directed the applicant in the right direction. Now, insofar as the size of the home, as Mr. Malakian indicated, there is, on these upslope properties, it's right around 1,500, 1,600 cubic yards is kind of what it ends up being as kind of a minimum. I don't know, an average, I guess, if you look at what's been presented over 10 years or to this board, whether it's 1,400 or 1,600, is what these upslope properties end up taking as far as getting dirt out of there. And of course, on the first one, it's almost double that, right? And it's double that because of its size and because of everything that they're trying to put in, such as amenities of backyards, pools, etc. Now, that's where I think some of the compromise could come in, is you start to take away some of those yards and you start to reduce your grading. And I'm getting the sense this isn't one of those projects where if you come back with something that's 200 square feet smaller, that you're going to satisfy this group and you're going to satisfy this board. I do think there's going to be a substantial kind of alterations. That's my gut feeling now. But I must say, I also do agree with your style, and I do agree with the direction you're going as far as a modernist look. There are, though, elements that certainly could be refined, and that it is very busy, and there's a lot going on. It just feels as though the designer really wanted to put everything he had into this, right? And so there's just so much happening, and so that in itself creates a lot of undulation, a lot of windows, a lot of openings, a lot of decks in the front, and a lot of those decks end up looking onto people's yards, so then you get concerned. So I think the modernist approach is fine in these hillsides, and if you go back, Neutra was doing this a long time ago, doing modernist homes in the hillside, so it's nothing new. It's been happening for many, many years. Insofar as the materials and how it's integrated, that's something that could be worked into. Overall, though, I do think that it was mentioned several times, is there needs to be a different design approach, almost, as far as site planning is concerned, on the three properties. And you have done that. So if you look at your site plan, you absolutely have a different layout for these homes, so you're in the right direction. It would probably help your cause to start now varying the roof heights a bit, based on the topography and how it moves along, and that's going to reduce some of your square footage. It's going to reduce some of your mass. You might even, on some of them, use more of a sloped roof. Let's say go with more of a contemporary craftsman look. Now, I don't think that you want to have a modern home and then a contemporary craftsman and then a contemporary Spanish or something like that. That I think is the wrong approach. I think you pick a style and then you have certain variations of that style based on the site, and you let the topography of the site dictate that. And so I do think a grading plan is going to help, and when you're doing the grading plan, you're going to show your top of walls, and it's going to really help this group understand the details behind it. But when you're doing that, you should really try to be minimizing your grading. And so 3,300 on 1,600 and 2,500, those are excessive because they're happening at the same time. And so you're really moving 7,500 cubic yards of dirt at the same time. It's a lot. It's a small street, so you have to be mindful of it. At the same time, we do appreciate the fact that you're bringing all three at the same time. And because some developers will do one and then they'll do something sneaky on the second one. You don't quite know where you're getting on the third one. And trust me, you're going to be more of an state of anxiety when that happens, because you're thinking, well, okay, we agree on this one, on this first one, but what's going to happen on the second one? What's going to happen on the third one? Here you're getting the whole picture, which is nice, I think. So I do appreciate them doing that. So although we'd say, okay, 7,500, and as I said, in the past they've all been about 1,500, 1,600, up to 1,800 or something like that. I think if you're going to be reasonably expecting development on this 3 lots, they're going to be around the 4,500 cubic yards. That's kind of the way they end up being, more or less. Now, that might go down to 3,800 or that might go up to 4,800. Again, it's just an expectation of what is the practical way of these upslope homes lending themselves. That significantly comes down when it's a downslope property. So you just don't have that in this scenario. And so I believe I've gone through most of my thoughts, and so at this point, I guess we could speak about our intent of how we want to proceed as far as some motions, and then we could actually review some of the conditions that staff might have.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I heard from each of the board members was that there's a need for a diagram outlining the cut and fill and the geographical layout in reference to that. So a grading plan is, I think, necessary for us to further comment. That's what I'm hearing. So I would maybe encourage the board to consider a continuation pending submission of a grading plan so we can work out conditions as an option, or in the alternative, a motion to redesign with a grading plan in place.
If I may add to that, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's wise to continue it to see the grading plan. It's just, the grading plan will not change the cubic yard that is being proposed. So my biggest concern is the amount of grading. If they can get a bigger house, I'm not, going to be questioning that as long as they can minimize the scale and the mass. And I just want to add something else to the public. These lots have been vacant. Something is going to happen to them. Somewhere along the way, somebody's going to build a house. Whether it's 2,500 square feet, whether it's 3,000 square feet, there is going to be, like Mr. Chairs, you mentioned, there is going to be a grading. There is going to be, even if you wanted to put a 2,500 square feet home on this, you're going to end up with 1,500 cubic yard of dirt removal. You're going to have with large, 15-foot retaining walls to make that work. I just wanted to put it out there. So, and there are, although, even there's numbers, like the other house, technically with the lot size and the percentages, he could even put a bigger house, but, that's even going to increase the amount. But, I think, like you said, most of these houses in the past, on these uphill slopes, within the 10,000, 12,000 square feet range properties, we've approved 3,000 square feet, hopefully or not. But like I said, if they can reduce the grading amount and mass and scale and works, fine. But when they come back, I sure like to see a grading plan, a preliminary grading plan. I know maybe it's not part of the requirements, but in this particular case is essential due to the fact that he's creating the driveways.
Well, I think if he actually puts some elevations in his site plan, he doesn't necessarily need a grading plan.
Yes.
If he can put retaining walls and wall heights on top of walls, just to kind of understand what's going on. Like, I was just kind of just brainstorming and looking at that section over there, and I'm thinking about the top one, which is a cut section through the 1830 section 1. You notice he's actually lowering the garage from the street level. So he's actually digging into the hill. So if what we're saying is, for example, reduce the grading, he can just literally raise that. But on the other hand, the neighbor across the street is going to see more of a mess. So do we increase the grading, lower this building into the hill, and reduce the amount of mass that is sticking up in the air, or?
There's a reason why the garage was dug in, because as it is proposed now, it's not considered a story. And on that lot, and only that lot,
because of the slope.
Because of the slope, yeah.
But it says here all the lots they're all 3 stories here.
No, there's 2 stories.
If that's the case, I was in error. There's the 1830 should only be 2 stories.
It says 2-story in the staff report.
It's considered a 2-story house.
I'm looking at the key.
Because the garage is subterranean.
But
correct.
Then what happens when you go further in that section? That's why they have what happens here in the back section. This is not considered as a 3-story?
The stairway is not considered part of the third story.
The garage is not considered a story because it's 3 feet.
Right.
But there's a question about the laundry room and I think a storage room in there that we may have to get rid of, but
and that was eliminated.
I think there is a solution for
there
that.
There is a solution.
That's the reason why.
One of the things that we also discussed in reference to this particular section, or highlighted in this particular section, is playing with the backyard area. there's a lot of cut in this particular one in the backyard.
You could play around with these heights. I mean,
I think one quick solution that will save you hundreds of cubic yards is just basically move the garage forward. You have quite a bit of setback. Just move the garage forward and cut the back out and let it sit on the slab, and you're done with quite a bit of grading there.
It's true.
You'll just end up with different retaining walls in the back.
Yeah, and then the retaining wall is hidden inside the building. You reduce the, you already have like a 30-foot setback.
You can step.
And then it's stepping, and it just solves that problem. And you can use the front as a deck, which then eliminate some of the back deck.
And you could pull the deck back to be right above the garage versus hanging over, which was one of my concerns.
And we'll put that into the conditions with the caveat that we'd have to make sure that the garage still was considered not a story if it's pulled forward.
Well, that would require, if the garage was moved forward, that would require some tweaking to the rest of the house, such that part of the
whole thing is going to be
the whole thing is going to be redone.
Right. So just to be aware.
I think what's important to pinpoint is what Mr. Malakian is pointing out is the fact that if you're looking at the section, just by simply shifting the garage forward and get rid of that backyard, you're saving a ton of grading. But while doing that, if you really want to reduce your grading, you actually move the house higher, and then you've reduced your grading, but now you have this huge home, right? So it's almost like be careful what you wish for, right? There's got to be a compromise there. You got to really look at it and try to figure out what is the right approach for each one of the homes. And they're all going to be different. And, I think these are some wonderful comments as to the general direction, I think, as a strategy of the third one.
Do you want me to, do you want me to review the conditions of each of the houses, and then I've also written some comments, potential additional conditions, and that sort of provides a framework?
Sure.
Sound okay? Or
I want to start with the last one first, just because we were just
I
talking
can start
about it.
however you want me to.
Yeah,
that's the easiest.
Okay,
easiest one.
So 1830. I've got shift the footprint of the residence to more closely follow the topography of the site. And that was sort of the pivoting comment that I went over.
On the no.
I'm sorry?
On this area here?
Yeah. And
I don't think that is the biggest place to start. I think you start with what Mr. Malakian described, and then from that, I think everything is going to shift, get modified, get amended, and if that occurs, then that occurs.
Okay, consider moving the garage forward to reduce grading. That's what I've written. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. The rear yard, or I'm sorry, the retain.
That's going to be reduced at the same time when he needs to reduce that at the same time.
I'm sorry, what?
He needs to reduce the rear yard also.
Oh, yes, that was what I was going to read. The retaining wall in the rear yard shall be reduced in height to minimize landform alteration to better conform with the hillside design guidelines.
Well,
not only the wall, the yard itself.
Well, as you reduce the height of the retaining wall, that brings the wall closer to the house.
We'll make sure that the focus will be on reducing the size of the yard and make sure that whatever wall results meets codes.
But we've had these instances in the past with upslope properties. I think just my general approach has been, and what I'm hearing right now is, some of these yards that are created in the back, such as, it's hard to see from your vantage point, like this area over here, which is literally shaving away, 10 feet of dirt and, 30 feet wide. It creates a lot of excessive grading. Now, of course, the owner gets a yard in the back, but at the same time, it's easily, you can accommodate that with decks. You can accommodate that with roof decks that are even stepped back where you can't really see it from the street or whatnot. So in a way, if we're really trying to make a meaningful difference in the grading of these things, by reducing and eliminating those real yards, we're really making a substantial impact towards making a meaningful reduction in that. So we're not, I don't think, talking about reducing the retaining wall by a foot or two to get rid of a couple hundred cubic yards. It's substantially getting rid of that yard in a way to try to really minimize grading here.
And we could have the designers explore whether how impact walls would, if you wanted to look at the option of impact wall versus.
He could even stay with, what is that, H/2 is maximum is 15 feet.
15 feet.
Maximum is 15 feet.
Well, the other section, I'm not sure which section, how that section is cut. I think that section.
The bottom one or the top
The
one?
bottom one.
Bottom one, yeah.
There's no hill there. I'm not sure where that exactly is. So I think that definitely has room for the top section to move back or even grade it a little bit further back, even though there's no grading. And you create this step into the upper level, even though it's sort
That's
of.
if the slope is accurate.
If the slope, I think the slope is accurate. It's just the grading of that.
That section you're talking about, Mr. Malikan, is right here.
Talking about 1830 now.
I thought we are talking about 1830.
We are talking. Oh, okay. I thought we were on 1820. Sorry.
All right.
Section cut.
And then because of its location, we also have to consider the no addition to the massing, if not a general reduction to the massing. Because as we were doing these things, making these recommendations, because of where that's located, because I went out there, this is of the three, this seems to be the most massive vertically on the front side, and then it has this volume here. It's also very massive, I feel. So we want to maybe ask staff to consider working with the applicant on making sure that that doesn't get any bigger, if not reduced.
Design changes should result in an overall reduction in massing of the house.
I like that.
If I could
Well said.
recommend that we scrap most of the staff comments because these houses are going to be significantly different when you next see them. We'll keep things like a window schedule and everything we've heard today that we'll repeat for you. Things like we're changing the color to be better conforming with the hillside guidelines. But anything specific about the retaining walls or the yards, that's built into everything that you've discussed. So we won't use our staff comments for those.
Okay.
Nice suggestion.
Just a general comment. I really like the horizontal effect of the glass and the details that they provided. I think it would make a little bit more sense if they have some continuity of these vertical lines that are, because the horizontals all follow together, but the vertical ones, the dividing of these spaces, I think makes a lot more importance in these.
We were concerned that these windows aren't actually going to be operable the way they're drawn. They're
Well,
kind
the
of
way that they're
abstract.
drawn and the details they're showing, they're non-operable.
Right.
So if they are
So we'll
gonna
be getting more
operable,
verticals, I'm sure.
then they may want to consider, showing the sections that are operable or whatever they are, because right now they're not.
Yeah, we did ask for more window information. We'll keep that for all three of the houses.
But I also suggested that this horizontality should be broken. This floor line. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I think the style governs for that.
Yeah.
I think the details of metal railing versus glass railing versus wood railing, those are something that it needs to be simplified. I think more consistent. Some of these, maybe if you have these two materials coming together, this volume and this, it kind of loses its importance. So I think there needs to be a way that these become a little bit more separated and become softer and simpler. And you have canopy that comes right in, and then this is a heavier piece that comes into a different proportion. Some of these kind of look at, but I think in general, I think if they look at some of these more massing issues, I think you'll solve.
And then some of that's in keeping with the staff comments, but we'll still scrap those, see where the design is, and then take that into consideration for the new designs.
Okay, so based on Jay's suggestion, I don't think I need to go over anything else, and we'll keep more of the generic comments.
Yeah. Do you have a list of those? Or? I do.
I have some.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. One thing I've added from your comments is to provide a grading plan.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Or just top of wall and contour information.
Going back to the windows, something to consider, and that's something that they may want to look into with their energy consultant. If they're going with the dual glazed, I have a hunch that it may not pass the Title 24 energy aluminum windows, because of the aluminum itself may not actually have the. So they may want to consider using wood windows, and that may be something that it will help, and it will soften the look. It will bring a little bit a softer feel to this contemporary proposal. I think it will help them.
Okay. Mr. Charchian suggested relooking at the size of the plant material. We can keep
only
keep
on
that
some
for
of the trees that they've outlined are starting off at I think 5-gallon sizes. If I read the report correctly, and I think that's insufficient. I'm not an arborist, I'm not a landscape architect, but if we want the hillside to look as anywhere close to depicted, anytime within our lifetimes, we should probably suggest to have larger plant materials.
The landscape plans are fairly generic.
This may be maybe more specific now.
24-inch anyways.
24-inch?
Yeah. All the trees. He even got the live oak 36 blocks. Those are just shrubs and vines and.
So one thing that I noticed in the landscape plans, and I'm not sure if proposed trees are in the property or within the dedicated section of the parcel. So that's not clear, and I think at one of these drawings it was a little bit unclear, so I think that's designation of...
Okay. Yeah, the landscape plans may not show the dedicated area.
Yeah. So make sure that he's not showing it in the dedicated, it's outside of the dedicated.
Okay. I'm not sure whether this is something you all want anymore or not, but I got the feeling that you wanted some information about separating out the amount of grading dedicated to the pool, particularly at 1800, versus as it is now. So if the pool was eliminated, how much grading would be? How much less grading would be required?
So I believe that was my comment, and my concern was staff's recommendation was to consider eliminating the pool or conditioning that the pool cannot be later added on with this particular property. I would like to see an overall approach to reducing the grading at that property. So if they could achieve a pool and still have reduced grading, I'm all for it. I'm not trying to prevent someone from having a pool. What I'm saying is we have to take a look at the overall grading. That's the largest footprint, largest house, and adding a pool on top of that, they can more power to them. But the overall grading and the overall mass has to be reduced.
Okay.
I think we'll have a note that the board supports removal of the pool at 1800 unless it can be located in a way that wouldn't significantly add to the grading, and that we'll look into removing the other two pools depending on how we treat the backyards.
1,800 cubic yards?
1,800 Marion.
Another spot that there's a covered patio. You got a whole volume in here. That's covered. Then you got the second floor on top of it. That's all excess mass and excess grading.
Mr. Charchian also mentioned, and I actually, several of you mentioned that there be more differentiation in style for each of the houses.
Not
so they all
so
can be
much differentiation.
temporary. They can all be temporary, but just a little different than they are now. Okay.
The site orientation and contours would somehow or another dictate variations in the facades and the designs of the
form.
I think the goal will also, listening to the neighborhood, to create something where these conceivably could be seen as houses built at separate times with separate ideas rather than a development. So by creating a differentiation within the consistency of materials, placement of materials and style, that makes sense?
I think playing with the materials is
difficult, but
right. And that's what I was thinking. That would be difficult to accomplish. Well,
is it a goal or not? Yeah, we can.
I think the goal is to pick a style, which they have. It's a modern style, and to go with that style, and to be able to really look at each site, vary the roof heights, vary the deck locations, vary the window locations, so they're reducing privacy as much as possible for the neighbors, and that ultimately is going to result in a different looking home, especially because the garage orientations are so different. So it's going to lend itself to a variety. And then they could start playing around with some different colors and maybe some different railing materials and maybe some different things.
Differentiate it by just having maybe one house with glass railing, other one metal railing.
That's what I'm saying.
You know.
And a general concept of each house being less busy than what we're looking at.
Color combination could change also. Now we have a same color pretty much. Consistent through all three of them.
So that leaves us with the middle home, right?
Well, actually, there were two other things that I wanted to bring up that are sort of maybe can be put on every home as a condition. There was some mentioned by some of you on outreach with the neighborhood. I don't know at this point whether you want to put that as a condition or...
We shouldn't condition that.
We have the authority to do that. No.
We can recommend.
It's a gesture that...
Well, that's what I mean, recommendation.
It's a,
Okay.
We've made the recommendation, but we can't force you to do it.
Right, okay. And then consider varying roof heights, which we just talked about.
If I can throw a couple of other things in that are general comments. There were several mentions that you'd like to see a soils report.
Not me, because that's going to be handled by the building department. I'm concerned about the grading. So
A suggestion for them to look at some Schindler homes and some details of Schindler homes. He uses a lot of horizontal window treatments and low and high roofs. So I think that may help them kind of direct some of these detailing and some of these massing.
Okay. Another condition would just be to verify with GWP about the power pole locations and that they won't be changed in any way.
Well, they will be changed because they're on the slope side of the property, and there's going to be a dedication. So my concern was that if they're going to do this dedication, GWP might say, okay, you know what would be easier? Let's just put them on the other side of the street.
Probably.
Okay, so
those are serving other properties too, so it's not going to be that...
I think, though, it'd be important to understand, and for the community to understand as well, is if it's just a dedication or dedication plus improvement, and then that would in itself, dictate a couple of different things.
It seems like it continues on to Los Angeles side. So what happens? Who takes care of this situation?
And we could have the applicant just confirm with Glendale Water and Power that there won't be any issues.
Yeah, and if it is going to be an improvement, then if they should show where the new curb and gutter is going to be. Then that way we could have a better understanding of its relationship to the garage.
It's a landlocked.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a question for Steph. Is there one of the properties, does the applicant have a property on the Los Angeles side that's going through review with Los Angeles, or are these the only 3 properties where they're developing? Do you know?
I don't know. As I know, we have 3 properties in Glendale. I don't know whether they have anything in Los Angeles.
Abutting this property.
Abutting this, I don't think so, because the woman that was here before.
You guys don't have anything. Okay, shaking their heads.
Yeah.
We had a general condition to, in reducing the massing, approach various ways to reduce the massing, up to and including possible reduction of square feet and changes to the program of each of the houses. We had a recommended condition. I didn't hear if there was any concurrence about considering altering or having multiple floor levels rather than consistent floor levels at each level.
My personal belief in that, on that comment, is that the homes just don't end up being very livable. In these upslope things, when you have just different slopes, they're not very livable to begin with. So if you could avoid it, I think it's much a better product. Certainly.
Okay, so the floor plates as proposed are acceptable. We'll strike that.
Yeah, I think the idea is to step it back into the hillside, as opposed to varying them. But if it helps the massing, they could look at it.
It will help the massing. I mean, that's my gut. I mean, they don't have to do it in every, at least portion of it.
Certainly in the middle one, I could see that.
Well, the middle one is attempting to do that. You see how it's breaking? It's got a 2-story volume, 3-story volume. Here, it's got a 3-story volume and a 3-story volume on the other one. No, I'm not saying it has to be. If they can achieve the mass.
I agree, yeah. It shouldn't be a condition.
We'll put it as a consideration, and when we work with the applicants, we'll focus on 8220, the middle house, with that idea and see if it works for any of the others. So this is all very scattered. There was, on the right-hand house at 1830, there was concern about needing to create a break between the floors, but then that kind of morphed into a more general comment for all 3 houses.
I don't remember that thought.
I brought it up.
It was Frej's, yeah.
What was your intent?
I was because of the trying to break the mass. Trying to break the mass. Now that he's going to raise this up to eliminate grading, you drop this a little bit more. At least.
Oh, you're talking about the roof line itself.
Well, not necessarily the roof line, the floor line too. I mean, he's got 11. Oh, that's 11. I mean, he has to work it out. I mean, it's 1 or 2 steps. I think it's workable.
Okay, so that goes back to the consideration to have.
I mean, that's my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's fine with me. I know Mr. Mulliken is right that these homes deserve that kind of a flatness on the floor. But again, I'm looking at this front. I'm looking at the articulations are. I have to look at it from the side to see. When I'm looking at the front, I see a mess.
Well, we could make it as a consideration, and if that helps their massing, they do it.
Okay, good.
Okay, then, Roger, did you have specific notes for the different houses?
Just the conditions in the staff report.
Okay. So I had a couple more. Well, for 1830, the house on the right, we'll have I don't know if this will be a condition at this point, but the idea of moving the garage forward.
Oh, yes. Right. I put
assuming
that.
Assuming it doesn't.
First comment, yeah. 1820. They have the garage forward. They have a deck. So
yeah. The only issue is whether it becomes a 3rd story or not. So.
Well, you just have to come out and go to the side and go up.
What will happen probably is that garage becomes detached.
Oh.
Depends how much you pull it forward, I guess.
Okay, we had a specific comment for the right-hand house again about the overhanging deck that created additional mass. We could fold that into our general.
If it's Roger, but if it's lower than the street 3 feet lower, or it's not, it won't be a issue.
Average top of curb you're talking about, the 3 feet?
Right. And 2 weeks ago, the design was considered a 3-story, so they buried the garage in a little bit more to get that reduced. So I don't know how much they, excuse me, they buried it. But I think any increase in the height of the garage is going to be considered a 3rd story unless you just broke the garage design from the house and created a detached garage.
Well, I think we've already based our comments on the 3rd home right in the beginning, and we prescribed a solution, right? So I think we're just better off going with that solution because it seems as though there was a consensus. And
about the garage bringing closer to the street.
Yeah, we were moving the garage closer to the street, and at the same time reducing the grading at the backyard at the rear, which would in itself step the building and reduce grading and reduce
that
some of the
2nd
square
story
footage.
can move in, can move back more,
correct.
so that there's no 3-story.
Right.
Each level, yeah.
So I think, overall, we're probably we've given a lot of thought to the 3rd one, whereas in, the 2nd and 1st one, we haven't really given them all that much guidance as far as site orientation. So were there any comments that you found or you heard regarding the 1st and 2nd one, regarding site orientation? Because right now they're pulled up on the hill. And
well, we heard you discussing if they were brought lower, closer to the street, we would have grading issues and slope issues.
I know a comment that Mr. Malekian had made was there was a lot of excessive grading in the rear as depicted on the sections, and they were probably doing that to stabilize the house or the hill above it, and it says that could have been increasing the cubic yards. That might be a way to reduce that. Another might be was literally moving the home closer to the street, if possible.
It's all about a matter of reduction of the square footage. If he keeps that square footage,
reduce the overall footprint, I guess.
I mean, if he's, if we're saying, okay, go do a 4,000 square feet house and reduce grading, I don't think that's going to happen.
But that's not what we're saying. Yeah, we're talking about a smaller home.
Smaller home, but
where they decide to cut the line, I guess it's up to you.
They have to figure that out themselves,
I think a lot of the sort of generic comments that Jay and I went over may also apply to...
Sure, absolutely. But I just wanted to just finish my thought. So it seems as though for the 3rd home, we've given a lot of thoughts as to how to reduce mass and bulk and at the same time reduce grading. And on the 1st one, there seems to be a consensus is just reduce the footprint and the square footage, and also relook at all that excessive grading that's occurring in the back. Mm-hmm. And based on that, you see what size of a home you end up at, what sort of grading reduction you've achieved.
I think their driveway may have an issue based on the slope of the grade that it's inclining in.
Which one?
The slope in the front.
The first one.
The first one, yeah.
So I think definitely a civil engineer needs to look at this, and then the 20% slope that I think it's definitely going to be a 20% slope for it.
Calling it out as 9%.
9%. So on a 9% on a almost a 10%. It's like a 60-foot long. That's like 6 feet rise, and I don't think that's a 6-foot rise. It's a lot more than that.
A lot more than that.
Okay, so we'll have
very
a condition.
Good point. So basically, those are the comments as far as site orientation.
I think just the overall grading, if they look at that, and some of these.
I think that will dictate where the direction they'll be going.
Right.
So the 2 conditions for 1,800 are reduce the square footage of the house and the amount of grading, and see where the mass and the footprint, and see where the mass ends up.
So those were the 2, and then the 3rd one is
restudy the
driveway.
Yeah.
Right, I've got that as a separate one.
And then the 4th one is restudy the amount of grading that's occurring at the rear.
Oh, got that, yeah.
See if it's absolutely necessary for stabilization of the hill. And if you could read. Yes.
No, sorry, I don't want to keep bringing it up. All these garages are way deep. Not necessarily on the middle one. 1800 and 1830. No, there's still got a substantial depth garage that could be eliminated way further. You got it's on the top left.
The same comment as
Same
number,
comment,
the
yeah.
3, number 1. Same comments for 1 and 3 was that reduce the depth of the garage, thereby reducing grading.
Although for number 1, there's a third that requires a 3-car garage, so there's a tandem space in that garage.
Well, if you go less than 3,500 square feet, you don't need 3 cars.
If it comes down to that,
Yeah,
sure.
so-
We're not always that prescriptive with the square footage. So.
Mr. Chairman, I also was, if the board agrees, I think that renderings need to also include any retaining walls that are going to be needed for those driveways, which are not there now, to give a better view for us and also for the community members.
Well, should we add to that also more realistic landscaping?
Landscaping, well, you could look at it as the home shifts and everything shifts, it's all going to change anyways.
The location of the landscape?
If the footprint changes and the orientation of the home changes, the landscape plans are all going to change.
Right.
Yeah, but for the renderings, Mr. Kelly was asking about.
I wasn't sure
depiction
that
of
these
the
renderings showed the
renderings
proposed landscape
because-
plans accurately.
Because one of the comments I think I've made it was a lot of these trees aren't there, and they're depicted as maybe 15, 20-year-old trees. And,
Well, we could add more trees to the back.
Yeah.
That's your suggestion, you know.
I just want, my only, Jay added that. My concern was, I want to see retaining walls on the driveways, because sometimes you get some really ugly retaining walls with a lot of mass to support some of the volume of earth that you're holding back on these driveways. I don't see any of them. And to your comments earlier, especially on these sharp turns, there isn't, nothing's depicted.
Well, the maximum height to base where I know the hillside is 5 feet exposed.
Yeah.
So
I think in overall, I think the retaining walls that they have at the rear, they've done a nice job to reduce
Yes, they
that.
have.
I think their design is really helping that situation and creating these large, massive retaining walls. And if they lower it, obviously, it's going to get larger, and then we're going to have another issue. So I think in general, I think that's good.
Well, and for the middle one, I guess some of the comments that we've made on the first one applies as well, as in we study the backyards and the grading at the rear to see if there's any room for reduction, and the garage as well. Although in this one, the garage is not big and it does step. So as far as the hillside design guidelines are concerned, it's
the
almost
massing
there.
works on that one.
Yeah.
The massing works. It's just
Yeah, the massing does work.
It's just the grading.
But that front yard area is fairly large, and
Yeah.
if that can be adjusted to achieve some grading, savings on grading, that would also be.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, because, we were discussing that earlier, but at least what it does do is it allows cars to park up there as opposed to parking on the street or parking on the
That's also
driveway. So in these impacted areas, you kind of want to get a car away from the street, on the street. So if a fire truck is coming, they're not parked there. So we can't have cross communication, sir. The public portion is closed. So, although, anyways, just a thought, but certainly
Yeah.
we'll look at moving the home forward and getting rid of that large porte-cochere.
If it helps,
If it helps.
if it helps the grading, which is our main concern.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Jay?
Not for 1820, and I think we hit all the general comments, so I think we're good.
Okay, so.
All right, so do you want to just go start with 1800, and I'm assuming all of these will be returned for redesign with the conditions that we just discussed? Okay, so why don't we go with, is there a motion for 1800, Marion?
I'll make a motion for 1800 to return for redesign with the conditions.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, a motion was made to return the project at 1800 Marion Drive with some conditions. This will be a roll call. Mr. Mardian?
Yes.
Mr. Charchian?
Yes.
Mr. Benlian?
Yes.
Mr. Malikian?
Yes.
And Mr. Simonian?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. And we're down to 1820 Marion. And I'm assuming the same thing, return for redesign with the conditions discussed? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. Motion to return for redesign with conditions.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion was made to return the project for redesign. This will be a roll call. Mr. Charchian?
Yes.
Mr. Benlian?
Yes.
Mr. Malikian?
Yes.
Mr. Mardian?
Yes.
And Mr. Simonian?
Yes.
Thank you. And then finally, 1830 Marion?
And I'll make the motion on this one.
Okay. I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Motion made by Mr. Malikian and seconded by Mr. Mardian.
Thank you. Okay, a motion to redesign the project with the conditions. This will be a roll call. Mr. Malikian?
Yes.
Mr. Mardian?
Yes.
Mr. Benlian?
Yes.
Mr. Charchian?
Yes.
And Mr. Simonian?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Do we have minutes or?
There were no minutes on the agenda, so we really listed on the agenda. So, I think.
We'll wait till next time.
Yeah, I think Manoush may have forwarded you some minutes, but we really can't act on them tonight.
Okay.
Right?
Motion adjourned.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roger, you're.